welcome back to Molby on the Spot. We've had a little break, just a week off. International football and all that. We may come to a little chat about the international Reds in a few minutes. But of course, I am Trev Downey, joined by the Liverpool legend that is Jan Molby, for Molby on the Spot here on Anfield Index Pro. It just leaves me to welcome him back to your ears once more and your eyes if you're watching us live on YouTube. Good evening, Jan.
Good evening, Trevor. When you say international Reds, I assume you mean Denmark.
Well, of course. What other international Reds are there, Jan? You know what I mean? It's not like I can start pushing for international greens now.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not really at the moment. I wanted to start with a little story that I saw today, and I thought was very cool. And I want to get your comments on. I'm going to share the screen with everybody else so they can see what I'm talking about. This was a gathering of some of your former colleagues. Former Reds receive historical medals at Anfield, special Anfield presentation. 14 former players with retrospective league championship winners' medals for their contributions to the club's total of 20 top flight titles. And if I scroll down, we'll see some of the men involved there. David Fairclough for his 8 appearances in 82-83. David Hodgson for his 5 in 83-84. Alan Kennedy for his 8 in 85-86. I think that took a lot of people by surprise, that Alan Kennedy was still churning in performances in that season. Chris Lawler, whose son collected his on his behalf for his 6 in 63-64. And there he goes, the man himself for his 7 in 87-88, Jan Molby. Followed by Terry McDermott, who made 9 in 75-76. Ronnie Rosenthal, who made 8 in 89-80. Paul Walsh for his 8 in 87-88. And John Wark, who had 2 separate campaigns of 9 in 83-84 and 85-86. Stevie Highway, Colin Irwin, Sammy Lee and Alex Lindsay were presented, as was the family of Joey Jones in absentia. It looks like it was a fantastic do, Jan, and if we focus in a little bit there, guess who it is, the man himself. You enjoyed that, I'd say. It seems like it was a very cool occasion.
Yeah, no, it was. It was the Carabao Cup game against Southampton, and the club very kindly invited us to the boardroom where we were presented by our medals by Sir Kenny Dalglish and the guy you see on the right, Mr. Jonathan Bamber. And it was really nice. I mean, it's kind of, we all know the rules, don't we, Trevor? You have to play a certain amount of games to get a medal, and none of us did in those seasons. But they changed the rules at some stage. They changed the rules that you only had to play in 5 games to be able to get a medal. Somebody picked up on that, and then the club obviously ordered the medals and invited us all along. And delighted to say that most of us made it on the night, but it was great. I mean, I was on a table with young Chris Lawler, with Terry McDermott, to see the boys there. It was a great occasion. Yeah, and the one I was most pleased for was John Walk. John Walk had been at Liverpool and never picked up a medal. He runs around down Ipswich. But I also, because everybody used to assume John Walk in Ipswich, and no, I played for Liverpool a little while, and I was there when they won 2 titles, but I never got any medals. So he was actually the one when he got presented. He was cheering for himself. Whereas I think most of the others, I'm not sure about Paul Walsh, but Paul Walsh would have got one from 85-86. Ronnie Rosenthal would have obviously been his only one, which kind of felt, I wasn't even aware that Ronnie only played 8 games in 89-90 when he scored those 7 goals. So yeah, it was a really nice occasion. So Kenny has obviously been told that he's got to present these medals to us, and he comes over and talks to everybody, and he goes to me, "What are you getting the medal for?" I said, "I'm getting the medal for 87-88. He went, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, I broke my metatarsal twice." I said, then when I got fit, you convinced yourself that McMahon and Wheeler were better than me in the mix. I said, "It's fucking your fault." I didn't realise he said.
He is a wind-up merchant. We have to.
Well, to be fair, when Davey Hodgson went up and got his, and They went and David Hodgson gets his medal, and Kenny went, yeah, you bloody cost us 3. Where do you get that much on?
Yeah, well, there's nothing quite as vicious as old pals getting around the table again. You know, I imagine the piss taking was on quite a high level, Jan. Not polite at all. Yeah.
No, not at all. And even then, you go, you might have only played 5, 6, 7, 8 games or whatever, and then even somebody would go, but are you still sure you deserve one with that little contribution? But it was nice, and it was obviously Phil Thompson was in there as a guest, and Ian Rush as an ambassador, and there was quite a few of the other players who popped in. It was quite nice. It was quite a really nice evening. So I think all the players, and not everybody's as fortunate as the likes of Fairclough and me, and we live on a doorstep, But Paul Walsh coming all the way down from Southampton, and John Walk from Ipswich, and Ronnie Rosenthal, who lives in London now. Terry Mack, his good lady, brought him down from Newcastle. So there was a lot of travelling to be done by some of the boys, but I think they all enjoyed it. I think we were all a little bit unsure, because it's almost like why do I need this medal? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. But you guys are from the era of Ronnie Moran throwing the box of medals. Exactly. Take one if you deserve it. So that was sort of burned into your minds, wasn't it? Yeah. Did you deserve it? Yeah.
And I'm kind of thinking 87, 88, on the back of the 2 previous seasons, and I had 2 really good seasons, and whatever. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't make a contribution that season, so do I really want it, isn't it? But I've got it now, and it's a nice 170 collection. It's obviously identical to the ones they got back in the day. So all medals aren't identical from season to season. So, the club have ordered for specific. So Terry McDermott got a completely different one to all of us. But the one different with our medals, and I don't know if it makes any difference, we have our names on them on the back. So, back in the day, it would be nameless. But on this one, it says Jan Molby. So I don't know whether that increases or decreases the value. I'm not sure.
Oh, it's pretty magic, I think. That's fantastic. That's a nice little touch. I like that. I'm glad you mentioned Johnny Wark, because he was a player that I really admired. I think anyone who was watching football in that era knew how good he was, and it was a frustrating spell for him with some injuries and different things. But he always looked, Jan, very much like a fantastic footballer when he got the chance. When you see, like, I think he was highly rated. He wouldn't have signed for Liverpool. He wouldn't have been signed for Liverpool if he wasn't. But like, your memory of him as an actual player, he really was talented, wasn't he? I mean, he had that one season where he scored an outrageous amount of goals for Liverpool.
He is so incredibly humble. And John has this thing about, but I'm an Ipswich player. I went to Liverpool for a couple of years, but I wasn't good enough. And you go, no, John, you're playing yourself down here. So the season you're talking about is 84-85, which is the season John joined towards the back end of the following season, the previous season. And I came in the summer of 1984. So we spent 3 or 4 months together living in a city centre hotel. So I got to know John really well. I came over. I had a license, but I didn't have a car, and John didn't have a license. And when he eventually got a license, I'm thinking the world would have been better if he wouldn't have got one. Because Christ almighty, what a bad driver he was. But John was just a really great lad, you know what I mean? But he was obviously, that British culture. John was a big drinker, you know what I mean? He liked his pint, you know what I mean? And it was a real eye-opener for me coming from Denmark and Holland and thinking, Christ almighty, And it's funny because I was talking to Kenny Dalglish about, this is a while ago, about 15, 16 months ago. We were talking about the boot room and what was the function of the boot room. Now, we hear a lot of stories about the boot room. But Kenny also said, Jan, we spent a lot of time in the boot room discussing you lads. He said, because everything you did, we got to know. He said, so you go into the bank and withdraw £1,000 in the 80s. That's unusual behaviour. He said, so we get to know. He said, so we used to sit in the boot room and go, so what news is, well, Jan's been to the bank, he's withdrawn £1,000. What do you think? No, it's okay, you can handle that. You know what I mean? And John Walks had 16 pints. But that's okay. That's John Walks' fuel, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's kind of, all them things. And he was just mad. And Kenny said, listen, he said it didn't matter what you did. Alan Hansen just had 4 consecutive rounds of golf, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But he's okay, he can handle that. I mean, and Kenny, we used to sit there and weigh it all up. Should we have a word or should we not have a word? And of course, he said, we let most things go. But also, because you probably more or less knew that we knew. There was like a guilt feeling, wasn't it? You know, if you did something and you knew they knew, but you didn't say anything, you go, I owe these a few good performances, you know what I mean? So that was quite interesting, that. So what I'm saying is John was, but it didn't make any difference to John, because John played, he went back to Ipswich, and then he went to Middlesbrough, I think, and then he went back to Ipswich. And I think he played on until he was about 37. And we obviously had the pleasure of playing him in the early 90s and in the FA Cup when we beat them 3-2 and that. But I've always got it really well. I mean, John is just so genuine, you know. I mean, he can't do enough for you. He's always in a good mood. As soon as we walk into the boardroom, there he was, you know, that big grin. He's just a terrific guy, and he was a really, really good footballer. You know, football is about your managers, isn't it, Trevor? Your manager fancies you've got a chance if they don't. And, you know, I think after a while, Kenny was probably just being fair to him, and he's thinking, I've got Jan, I've got Steve McMahon, Ronnie Whelan's now moved into a centre midfield player. Be fair to John. We'll let him go and he can play some football. But that one season, 84-85, when he scored 28 goals from midfield, and there was no free role in midfield. There was no number 10. We played 4-4-2. So John was a midfield player, up and down. But this uncanny ability to arrive in the box and score goals and score a lot of headers. He never jumped for headers, you know, but his time was just perfect. He just ran straight into them. You know, none of these, like you see Joe Jordan rise or Duncan Ferguson rise and head them in. John never left the floor, but it was just perfect timing. He was heading them in here, there, and everywhere. And of course, you know, because I met him, I got to know him well, and telling all the stories about when he was the top scorer in the UEFA Cup. I think it was 1981. He scored 14 goals from midfield in the UEFA Cup. It was like mental numbers, isn't he? I mean, the guy was just a genius. And when I say genius, he wasn't like a genius footballer like John Barnes, but he was just so effective, up and down, both boxes, good at set pieces, you know what I mean, and just loved getting involved. And there's some lads at Liverpool who don't quite understand how loved they were. And John is one of them. Steve Nicol is another one. You know, where you go, just nobody's got a bad word to say, but everybody loves them, you know what I mean? They mean no harm to anyone in the so yeah, great to see John. John is a terrific guy.
Yeah, it's great to hear that it meant a lot to him to pick those things up as well.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that's a lovely, heartwarming story. And you know, you mentioned the fact that John was, as Eamon Dunphy used to say on the regular, a good player, not a great player, in terms of world class. But we've been talking about one there in the form of Kenny Dalglish, and again, just to share with people. Something I wanted to get your take on this, because we know that there's a big old fuss coming up soon, because there's a documentary about to air. It's on Prime Video. I think it's getting some cinematic release as well. There's the man himself knocking in that big goal back in the day to win the league against Chelsea at 85-86. And it's a whole big production. A film made by Asif Kapadia, who is a very, very, very excellent documentarian. He's made some of the best documentaries I've ever seen, Jan. And it just made me think, well, what a fitting tribute that is to the lad who, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, was obviously my Liverpool hero. And I wondered, because we've talked about this before, but I keep forgetting that we are regularly getting new viewers and new listeners to this show. And I wanted to ask you, because, you know, we're going to link into international stuff in a second. And it was that really that reminded me, you know, you were striding about, you mentioned earlier on, Denmark, in one of the most, I think, beloved international teams in history, around about that same era, the 86 World Cup. I mean, people just loved that team, loved the style of football you guys played and the standard of footballer that was in it. So not only for international, but at club level as well. Obviously, you've played with some amazing footballers between Ajax, Liverpool, everywhere else you've been. And I wondered, would you mind just doing a rundown for some people on who else do you think might almost be worthy of a documentary? When you think about it, like, who are the other players that are really up there on that pedestal? We'll give Kenny a spot, but if you were to think of 4 or 5 others maybe that you think, I wouldn't mind watching that, because they're not only were they wonderful footballers, but the life might be interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing in it, with the life being really interesting. Obviously, Kenny got a hell of a story, hasn't he? You know, I mean, yeah, obviously coming from Glasgow, working class, and that whole story with that Celtic team that he played in, because that's a story in itself, isn't it? And also how transfers were done in the late 70s. He went to Liverpool, and then, of course, going on to manage Liverpool and also overseeing or being part of the two tragedies and whatever. I mean, his life is just full, isn't it? And then him being the best candidate to be the new Liverpool manager back in 2011 or 12 or whenever it was, isn't it? And it just never stopped, even to this very day, where the club feel the need for Kenny to be involved on an ambassadorial role, isn't it? So if he doesn't deserve a documentary, if he can't make a good documentary about Kenny Dalglish, there's something wrong, isn't it? But I mean, there was this documentary about Peter Schmeichel on Sky not so long ago, which is obviously a guy I played with during my time with Denmark, and plenty of people have made documentary about Michael Laudrup, probably without Michael really taking part, because Michael is not like that. He's really quiet and wants to be in the background. But also, I think some of the Dutch guys, Koeman, Van Basten, Rijkaard, I would probably think, without being harsh, that Frank might be the better story there because of his background, and also going to AC Milan as the other two were the big stars, weren't Ruud Gullit and Marco Van Basten. And when you speak to any of those AC Milan players from that time, no. Our best player was Frank. Our most important player was Frank. And then, of course, also him going on to manage Barcelona and the Dutch national team anyway. So I think Frank would be a good story. And of course, and we talk about, Ballon d'Or and whatever. And of course, John Barnes. John has a story as well. Not a lot of people, realise that he was actually born in Jamaica. And he only came over to the UK when he was about 13, 14. And then his journey from then on in, how that all worked out, and how he's got picked up by Watford, and then, Liverpool and England, and to become who he was, I think is also an incredible story. I mean, to be fair, I'm sure people have made a documentary, but Ian Ross probably falls into that category as well a little bit, isn't it? You'll have most players today, Trevor, without them stories, because a lot of players will be in academies already at 5, 6 or 7 years latest, but I speak to certain guys of a certain age, and they go, well, I played with Ian Ross, in the early 80s at Chester, 4th division. You're probably getting £15 a week and things like that. And his journey of coming to Liverpool, and the doubt, there was a lot of doubt about Ian Ross, wasn't he? Bob Paisley put him in a team, and the teammates couldn't understand because he wasn't really doing anything. And Bob went, just leave him, he'll be just fine. And then, of course, what's interesting as well is whether you like it or not. I've been there. I coped, but Ian went to Italy, and it wasn't to his liking, So that is also, it's a story in itself, isn't it, Trevor? It's a story in itself. And what did you? It's all very good saying, went to Italy, might not have fitted in, struggled with the language, blah blah, whatever. But there's more to it than that, isn't it? Because it's 24 hours in every day, And I know what it can be like sometimes. And I, in fairness, have never struggled. I've been fortunate enough to never really struggle with the language, never really struggled to settle in. When I went to Ajax, there was a couple of Danes there, and I went to Liverpool. I stayed in a hotel with not just John Walker, but Paul Walsh as well. And so I've always been lucky in that. But I can imagine some people, sitting at home, pulling their hairs out, and the only thing you've got, the only reason you're there, the only reason I was in Amsterdam, the only reason I was in Liverpool, the only reason Russia was in Italy, is because we could play football, And if the football is not going well, I can imagine, what a lonely place it can be. And then you need something else, isn't it? So, yeah, it's fascinating, and people just always assume, all you got to do is play a bit of football. There's a lot more to it than that. I mean, it's not as easy as that.
For sure, and Asif Kapadi's Maradona documentary, which I imagine you've seen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like this is a guy who I think was the best to ever do it. But it's almost, the non-football stuff is almost just as interesting. And as you were talking about it there, you've told me a couple of times the story of how part of your welcome to Liverpool process was in at the deep end, where a certain grobbler came down and basically introduced you around the pub and then abandoned you to make good or not. And I'm thinking Bruce's story is good too. Like, Bruce has got some serious backstory there, and obviously a bit of controversy afterwards, and there's the whole witch doctor stuff. Bruce would make a hell of a documentary, I think.
Yeah, but Bruce is 12 episodes, isn't it?
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, but it is, Trevor, and it goes all the way back to, you went right the way back to him being a young boy, And then when he was a teenager and being in the army, the things that he got up to on his journey across to the UK and starting the crew and then going to Canada and coming back to Liverpool. And it's just mad. And even since he's retired, his life story is mad in the way he's been, where he's been coaching, been back to South Africa, coaching some clubs out there. He was over in Canada. Now finally he's back sort of living in Europe, half in Merseyside, half in Norway, isn't it? I was with him the other week and I went, Bruce, are you ever going to stop? No, my boy. I keep going. The hound dog keeps going. Okay.
Well, it was a spot-on impression as well, by in case people don't know.